Recording. Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Advice and Inspirations Advanced podcast. I'm Sacha Black. I'm not Joanna Penn, surprising probably everybody. And I am joined by Orna Ross. Hello, Orna.
Hello, not Joanna Penn.
No,
I
know. So today is a special show because Joanna is away, and so I am stepping into some very big, amazing shoes and having the honour of getting to talk to you all about cross-genre work as an author, business owner, writer, publisher. So I wondered if you wanted to start talking about this by looking at your journey. What was your journey? How did you come to work across so many different genres and businesses as well?
Yeah, okay. So I think it happened for me like it happens for a lot of people who find themselves in creative careers, in that you don't really plan it. It emerges and you begin to plan later. You don't plan from the start, kind of thing. So I always knew I wanted to write a novel, but I never thought I could. I just didn't give myself permission for many, many years, because I think I was overawed by the Irish literary tradition and the poets and things we had done at school, and, you know, all of that usual kind of stuff. So, but I did want to write. And so I became a journalist, a features journalist, which was brilliant training for later. And then I got more into the book business. I published nonfiction books. I worked as a literary agent. I ran a writing school, all these kinds of ancillary things around writing while writing myself. Eventually did the novel, eventually got that published. That didn't work out all that well, as people have definitely heard that story before, if they've listened before. And then kind of fell into self-publishing my own books. And so that was the best move, without a doubt, of my writing life, and changed everything and made a lot more possible. Everything became more fluid and easier once self-publishing books became possible, and I gave myself permission to enjoy it.
But you don't just write in one genre, because you write historical fiction, poetry, non-fiction with ALLi as well. So how did that happen?
Yeah, well, that's I wanted to talk about this today because it's the question that I get out, that question you just asked. How did that happen? And also, how do you fit it all in? I just get asked that question over and over and over and over again. So I wanted to kind of talk about the real practicalities of that. And I suppose each of those genres grew out of different parts of my writing life. So part of it is that I have been writing for a long time. So the non-fiction for ALLi, which is very much how-to fiction for a very specific group, self-publishing authors, that grows out of my teaching and journalism background combined. So as well as some of the things that I mentioned earlier, I also taught a culture and creativity course at UCD in Dublin. And yes, yeah. So, and that's where I developed a real interest in creativity and the creative process and how it works and how it happens. And so I was able to see the difference between the creative process at work in writing and how it works in publishing. So it's the same process, but it works very differently in each thing that we apply it to. So I was able to kind of see that quite clearly, because of that experience. The fiction was, as I said, always wanted to do it. So it was a creative intention that I always carried. And I have been disappointed with my trade publishing experience. So that was the first thing I did, was take my rights back from them and publish fiction. And I thought at that time I would full-time write fiction. That was my intention when I started that. But of course, quickly started ALLi, so the nonfiction came in. And poetry, I had written poetry when I was very young in school, like most people, pouring the old heart out into the notebooks. But I had stopped writing poetry for many years until a very close friend died far too young during the AIDS thing of the 1980s, which absolutely devastated me. And I started writing poetry again, and I haven't stopped since. So yeah, they all just came out of just different aspects of me, I suppose.
Oh, I love it. I find it so interesting how like these things like come around. I think the longer we are in this industry as well, we're all so multi-passionate, most of us anyway, that we do find these other like niches or aspects of ourselves that we haven't explored. Like yeah, anyway,
Yeah,
let's
I
talk
think
about you.
that is the first thing that I do want to say, actually, to as kind of tips for those who are listening, is that sense, if you have something that you want to do, but you don't have time right now, don't decide that you're not doing it. Just you're going to do it later, and just shelve it, because writing is a long life, and things unfold in strange and mysterious ways. And if you're meant to do it, it will happen. And I do very firmly believe that if you have a real desire to do something, you are supposed to do it, and you will find a way. The way will find you. You don't always have to be the one that pushes it, but it may not be right at a particular time, doesn't mean it will never happen. So, at any one time, I write across 3 genres, but today I can only write in one. And so at any one time, you're just working on the one you're working on, and there's always time to get to the others in time.
Absolutely. Baby steps everywhere, and you eventually get to the finish line. Okay. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in managing to write and publish across multiple genres, and like any tips or advice for overcoming them?
Yes. So I think what it is the same things that all authors suffer from, but multiplied by however many genre you're writing in. And it doesn't even have to be cross genre to feel it. It's the big O, overwhelm. And you don't have to be writing across multiple genre to feel that. You can feel it if you're writing across multiple series, or you can feel it just on one book. So overwhelm is a constant sort of occupational hazard for authors. And the problem with overwhelm is that it stops flow. And if you can't see your way, it doesn't matter if you can only see a little bit of the way, but when you are overwhelmed, depending on the degree of overwhelm, you can be completely stopped, or worse, you can be working very hard on something that's absolutely either has little or low use. So the first thing is always the self-care. The first thing is always the step away from the desk.
I feel attacked.
Honestly, I'm not looking at anyone except myself.
Oh my goodness.
The first step, though, seriously, is perspective. It's the perspective to see what is actually the most important thing to do and what has to go, because very quickly in this business, because it's all so amazing and fabulous and we love it all, very quickly you get to that point where you are overwhelmed. And it's our own fault. We just want to do this, and we want to do that, and we want to do the other. And as life at the moment is just firing all these amazing creative goodies at us, and we wouldn't be human if we didn't kind of get excited and jump up and down with some of them. But in terms of, it's fine if you just want to play, and that's absolutely fine, but I wanted to make my living as a writer. I always wanted that from my early 20s, and when you want that, it's a different thing. And so the first step is self-care, creative rest, which we're really bad at, and that's resting the mind. So however that happens for you, we were talking earlier, and I was saying, and I've said many times before, I literally couldn't function without meditation. So if people ask me, what is the one thing that allows you to do everything, I say meditation, because just the resting of the mind gives that perspective and gives calm that carries through the day and through the week. So that creative play in the form of some physical activity that takes you away from the desk. So that's number one. I'm always talking about these things, but because they are foundational, they are absolutely important. Then when you get that sense of perspective, you can actually begin to prioritize. And the other thing that I think is really, really key is balance. So people talk a lot about prioritizing, but they don't talk enough about balancing out the different aspects of how we work. So yes, there's across the 3 genre, but then on a book, there's the 7 processes that you need to put the book through in order to get it up and out there and selling to your readers. And there are the 3 different hats that you kind of need to wear as you go about your business: the maker, the manager, the marketer. And then there's the creative work and rest and play that makes it happen. So integration is really, really important. But in order to integrate, first you have to separate everything out. And that was the challenge for me. I was chasing myself around, I was chasing my tail, basically. I was getting things done, but I was pretty exhausted, and I was never quite sure that I was working on. I had this not very nice feeling that, am I working on the right thing? Is this actually the most productive thing for me to be doing? Is this the most profitable thing for me to be doing? So it was really necessary for me because I'm extremely intuitive, and my inclination is to just follow my intuition. But I had to, if I wanted to keep doing all the things I was doing and to write across these genre, I had to be more structured in my planning. So yeah.
Do you think that's a stage that everybody gets to, that we all need to get to that point where actually the business requires that structure in order for us to still be able to do the creative aspect?
If you're writing across 3 genre, yes, I think so. It's my sense. Or else, if you're naturally a good planner who just does it kind of without thinking about it. So I don't think Joanna, for example, we've talked about this before, I don't think she has a very structured planning process like I do. I mean, I have charts that I specially made up, and all it's really, really important support structure to me, that I sit down in a certain way each week and each month and each day and do certain things to make sure they happen. She does those more automatically because by nature she's a better planner than I am. And so I think it's that sort of counterintuitive thing, that the more intuitive you tend to operate in life, possibly the more you need a planning system. But I don't think anybody can write across 3 genre without doing some planning, and particularly around marketing. But also I think all the kind of planning things that you resist, the outlining and the everything people talk about. Are you a pantser or yes, thank you. A pantser or a plotter. You think of yourself as a pantser, but you need some plotting. So it's about finding that balance for yourself. And it's the same with the planning or just following your intuition. It's finding that unique kind of place of balance for you. And that's the challenge.
And you do have a very distinct planning process. So this is a great segue to go into that. Can you talk about how you plan creatively? What is that method that you're using? And how does that help you to manage all of the different aspects of your work?
So like I said, I created these planners that actually, it was really important for me that they plan. My rest and my play was planned. That was the single biggest thing. That was the most important thing about them. So I was very good at planning work. I was not good at planning rest and play. So things happened in a much more ad hoc way. Social events would happen, my family and friends and all of that. And that's one kind of thing. But I'm talking about actual structured creative rest, creative play, sort of rest and play that's done in order to feed flow. And so I needed to have planners that accounted for that, because if I didn't, I just ended up each day without it happening. I also needed to put in a money day twice a month, because if I didn't, I ignored money too much. And look at how I was managing money and processing things, and making sure that I was putting profit in the right place, and looking at return on investment, and all of that kind of thing that doesn't come naturally to me. I needed to put that into a plan to make sure that it would happen. Paying myself first, getting the money out of the business account over into the tax account, the personal account, all those kinds of things. If I didn't plan for that, it didn't happen. And so it was just key principles like that. So it's really simple. It's not like it's a complex, or an actual planning expert would probably look at them and laugh, but they work for me, and I think they work. I know they work for other authors who are like me and are faced with the same sorts of challenges, and they don't work for everybody, and people have to find their own way, I think. But I think they were the key things. And then understanding basic principles like doing what's important rather than what's urgent first, doing the thing that's I have to do certain tasks at the beginning of the day. Otherwise, I find, even though they're the things I most want to do, I find I don't do them, that kind of stuff. So, and knowing what your top task is at all times. So each day knowing, well, if I finish the day with this done, I'll be happy if I get other things done as well. The thing about the planning that's most important for me, and the reason that I use this method and have stayed with it, is I feel good when I do this. And when it slips away from me, I start to not feel so good again. Feel that busy mind coming on, and it just takes the enjoyment away. And the whole reason I wanted to be a writer was to have fun and not to be in a horrible job. So I want to make sure I'm the boss of me, and that I give myself a good time.
Do you talk about this in creative self-publishing? I'm just wondering if we have like a book or resource that we can point people to as well.
Yes, I do. I do a few things around it. So the second edition of Creative Self-Publishing has a planning section in it, and that's available to all ALLi members in ebook form. And out of that came planners, which are now, for the second edition, being upgraded, monthly and quarterly planners, which have daily plans built into them. And then I do a monthly, for planning patrons, do a monthly planning workshop where we together fill out the plans for the month to come. And we do some deep dive sessions then into the issues that are arising for people. So these are workshops. They're not webinars. They're not about giving information over, though that does happen, but it's a sort of a side issue. The information that we exchange as a group of working indie authors, the point of them is to plan and to get a plan for the coming month.
Awesome. Okay, so how does your approach to writing, publishing, and marketing differ across the different genres that you work in?
Yeah, so this is 9 questions.
I know, sorry. do you want to take maybe the
marketing across?
Well, let's start with writing. How does writing differ across the 3 genres?
Okay. So yeah, it is quite different actually. So writing fiction, I have to get up early in the morning and go straight into writing or editing, or writing and editing the novel. So that's the first one. I work in 90-minute bursts, and try to get 2 of those in per day. Poetry happens. So just an idea or something will come, and the poem arrives, and I just need to grab it. Now, it does not arrive intact always. Very occasionally it will arrive, a short one will arrive fully formed, and I don't have to do anything except maybe tweak it a word or 2 here and there, but that doesn't happen very often. But it arrives first of all, then I play with it, and that's a much easier thing because it's short form. It's so much easier to do short form. And the same with the nonfiction, and blog posts are relatively easy. They can be written in the cracks between doing other things. So I consciously try with nonfiction to just do one first draft and then one final draft, and that's it. I rarely do more than 2 drafts with nonfiction, but with fiction I draft and redraft and redraft. And poetry, I play a lot with different things. So nonfiction tends to be more collaborative as well. So I work with you on some nonfiction, and I work with some other authors on some of the books. And so, yeah, it's a much more collaborative process. I couldn't imagine. I don't know how people write novels together. I wouldn't. I couldn't even write a chapter with somebody else. A fiction, I don't think. Memo to self, I should probably do that sometime and challenge myself. But anyway, yeah, it just so it's quite different. I find writing fiction hard, but it's the thing that gives me most satisfaction when it's done. But it's the one that I have to really protect. I think the others would happen, either because they're being drawn out of me. People need the work to be done, and so I get a deadline and I have to do it. Or the poetry, I just play with it and it's kind of like fun. But fiction, I have to protect it. I have to draw a box and make sure it gets done, because it's much easier to do other things, and I need to be very protective of that time and space.
Are you a consistent, or like, are you writing fiction every day, or are you doing it in blocks of time? Because I find that once I start a project, I will go hard until it's finished, but then it could be a month before I pick up the pen again. So I'm literally, I need to start, but I'm finding it much easier to do other things. So I'm feeling attacked again.
No. Well, everyone's different and there are no rules. That's the major thing to say. These are just things that have happened along the way for me that might be of benefit to others. But yeah, I have to be very consistent. So I write fiction very, very slowly, because I really treat it almost like poetry. So, each sentence gets a lot of work, and so it takes a long time for me to write a novel. And so, yeah, I'm very consistent, and I just try and get those. If I don't get the hours done in the morning, that's it then until the next day, because there's so many other things that go on in my working day and in my family life and social life and stuff that I know that I won't. I'm quite tightly scheduled, with plenty of air around it. It's not that I don't feel oppressed or dominated by a timetable or whatever, but I don't have a lot of just, I schedule even downtime, that time where that has nothing in it. Even that gets kind of scheduled. So yeah, I am pretty consistent.
Okay, so let's move on to publishing then. How does publishing differ or not differ across the different genres?
Yeah, so publishing, I think we're separating out production and marketing. Is that right?
Yeah. So my last question was going to be, how does marketing differ?
Okay.
So take it however you prefer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So book production then, for the three, that's the one that's the most similar. That doesn't really alter all that much across the three genre. You put a book, I put my books together in a similar way. I do want to start creating more bespoke special books, particularly around poetry. There is a market for that, I know, and I would also really enjoy doing that, but I've done one special edition which I crowdfunded back in 2015. So I'm actually going to do a crowdfunder again later this year. I want to do more bespoke print, but I haven't. So up to now, it's been the same process across the three. The only difference being for audiobooks that I do my own poetry. I wouldn't dream of narrating my own fiction or nonfiction. It would exhaust me to even think of it. So yeah, the production is the one that's most the same. And then the marketing, there are similarities, but differences. So the similarities are that I am a content marketer and I rely on attraction. So rather than, don't do a lot of sales chasing stuff, but it does vary a little bit across. I do unusual things in my publishing as well. So while I am on all the platforms, it's mostly about bringing people back to my own core stuff, and I've done licensing of books and stuff like that. So I don't operate in exactly the same way. And for some of that, pitching influencers is pretty important. By influencers, I mean literary influencers like librarians or organizations or, could be anybody, but people who have sort of access to the readers that I'm trying to attract. So that has happened to some degree with the non-fiction, and also a little bit with poetry. So, but not with the fiction, historical fiction, which tends to be more what we think of as the usual indie kind of marketing structure, which is more around selling the digital audiobooks, digital audiobooks and ebooks and print on demand. So it varies in that sort of way. I think understanding from a marketing perspective, the most important thing is not about the fact that you're in these three different macro genre, because again, it's a reasonably similar. It's more about understanding whether you are a craft publisher or a volume publisher or an engagement publisher, and that can vary across the three genre. So engagement for me, I would be more of an engagement publisher for poetry than I am for, I'd be more craft-based publishing now I'm talking about, rather than writing craft. More craft-based for the fiction. And then, so it's the important thing, I think, to recognize is what makes somebody buy, when you're looking across the three genre, what makes somebody buy a poetry book is not the same as what makes somebody buy a how-to book about publishing. And that's the most important thing to understand. And that's then going to change how you set up your marketing. So the structure of what I actually do for each of those books is not that different, aside from the exceptions that I gave there a few moments ago. But the content and the way in which you might reach out to readers. So, for example, for my poetry publishing, most people who read poetry also like to write it. So one of the things I do is I have a fortnightly contest on Instagram where I invite other poets to submit their work. And engagement is a really important part of what I do as a poet, because I really believe that every poet needs a community and needs to either build that for themselves or needs to find it. And I know every writer needs a community in every genre. So there's nothing exceptional about that, but there's something particular in the way that poets relate to each other that becomes possible because of the short form. It's almost as we write poems to each other, we're communicating through the poetry, and there's very little communication outside of that needed because we've connected at that level. So that makes poetry quite different. So the important question as a multi-genre author, the important question to ask is, what does a person who buys a book in this genre and also in this part of the genre, what are they looking for from me, and how can I set that up, how to attract them and to bring them over to me?
So how does this work in practice then? Because I know you've talked a lot about structure, and this is also one of those impossible questions for a multi-passionate kind of entrepreneur creative. But what does a typical day look like? How do you fit in like the writing, the publishing and ALLi work?
By dividing the day into three, essentially: writing, publishing, and ALLi work. So it's quite simple, really, at the end of the day. It is all.
I mean, that does sound very simple. There's me making it complex in my
head. It's simple and it flows, as I said, if those practices are in place. And if those practices are not in place, it can feel harried and overstretched. So, but yeah, essentially it's all about time blocking and giving myself the space then that's needed to absorb. And I think one of the advantages I have is my great age. I've been around for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've learned what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And I think that is the single most important thing as a multi-genre author. Everything that's important for every author becomes intensified because you're doing it across the genre, so it becomes more extreme. So we all need to learn what we need to let go. And, you know, you very quickly, as you get into this business, you very quickly come to a point where you're going to be letting go something you really love. It's very easy to let go of stuff you don't love, but letting go of the things you really like.
Oh, stop it. I feel attacked again.
There's a reason you're doing this show.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay. Are there any resources or apps or tools or like any activities that you find particularly useful when managing your workload, your planning, like conserving that energy, kind of avoiding burnout?
Yeah, so Insight Timer is my go-to for various kinds of meditation. People that work for me, yoga nidra, you know, for a particular form of meditation that's really good for creative, sparking and manifestation techniques. I'm a sucker for all of those, and they have all really helped me in various ways along the way. So that is my sort of go-to app for the creative rest kind of things. On the creative play side, I really, this is very vague and everybody needs to kind of do it in their own way, but I think we are crazy if we overlook the value of music as a way to get us into the right mood, you know, to do whatever task it is we're trying to do. So we all have the mind that resists, and we all have the part that, you know, really wants to do the thing. And music is my best friend for that. So if I'm feeling resistant, I just need to turn something on and it changes the mood. So it's not an app and it's been around forever, but I think I'm just amazed when I, you know, meet people who don't draw on that resource.
One of my favorite apps is Shazam, which I use constantly. Yeah, like that's probably one of my most used apps, and every book has a playlist because it's like the tone and the mood and the feel. So I definitely like that one is definitely I do that for sure.
Yeah. I love that. And also I think as well as it's using it to help you get into the frame of mind of the book, also getting into the frame of mind to work or to rest, you know, so music that, again, Insight Timer has an amazing collection of music that is specifically about getting your brain waves in the right place for creativity or for other task-based stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of really interesting research coming out showing how sound affects the brain and how we can use that to our advantage as creatives. It takes a few seconds to just, you know, remind yourself to do this and to switch. And you can just, you know, empower yourself hugely by doing some of these simple things.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Any last words to listeners who would like to be able to write in multiple genres, but maybe have been disheartened in the past?
I would say, you know, do it. I would say do it. My experience of writing in multiple genre is that I write more because I write in different genre and that they feed into each other in a most interesting way. So do it sequentially, as I spoke about at the beginning. You know, you can say, okay, I get good at this one first and then I'll add in another one, or throw yourself in at the deep end and do them all at once, but know that it will take longer for each one to come to fruition. The most important thing as a multi-genre author is to realize you are the brand. So you're going to have to go across. And so there is going to have to be an integration, but also to know that that takes time. And so you can't fulfill your wish to be a multi-genre author overnight. It's not, you just simply can't. So don't be pushing and harassing and harrying yourself. Take your time, and you'll need to find a way to support yourself to be able to do that along the way. But in the end, you may have achieved more faster, but it won't have felt like that.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I guess that was my last kind of question. So I think that brings us to the end of the interview.
Perfect
Yeah.
timing. Thank you for asking all the questions. And
You're
yes,
most welcome. It was very interesting, and it's heartening to hear that it is possible.
oh, it's possible. It's always possible.
Well, I won't be here next time. It will be back to the marvelous Joanna.
Yes.
So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sacha. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Happy writing and publishing. Bye-bye.
Bye.